I made the first of many painful phone calls to my credit card companies. I'll be honest, some of them were rude, and a couple outright refused to help. But two of them agreed to lower my interest rates, which felt like a tiny victory. At the same time, I picked up a second job delivering groceries after work. It wasn't glamorous, but it gave me just enough extra cash to start chipping away at my debt. Every time I made a payment, even if it was only $50, it felt like I was taking back a little bit of control. But life wasn't about to let me off easy. Just as I was starting to make progress, things with my dad took a turn for the worse. The infection in his foot spread, and the doctors had no choice but to amputate below the knee. My mom was devastated. She called me every day, crying about how scared she was for the future. I wanted to be there for her, but I was barely holding it together myself. I visited my dad as much as I could, but every time I saw him in that hospital bed, I felt a crushing guilt. He'd always been so strong, a no-nonsense guy who'd worked his whole life to provide for us. Now he looked frail, defeated. Then came the arguments with my siblings. My sister Kelly lived out of state and couldn't visit often, but she called to offer advice that felt more like criticism. "Mike, you need to step up," she said one night. "Mom can't handle this alone." I snapped back. "Do you think I'm not trying? I'm working 2 jobs just to stay afloat, Kelly." The tension between us boiled over, and for a while we barely spoke. It felt like everything was falling apart. My family, my finances, my mental health. One night, after another long shift delivering groceries, I came home to a pile of unopened mail on the kitchen table. Bills, collection notices, and a letter from my landlord reminding me that rent was due. I felt like giving up, but then I saw a card my mom had slipped into the pile. Inside, in her shaky handwriting, she'd written, "I know things are hard, but I'm proud of you. Don't give up." I don't know why, but that card hit me like a lightning bolt. My mom, who was dealing with more stress than anyone, still believed in me. That was the push I needed to keep going. Around this time, I started thinking about my career. My office job wasn't just boring, it was soul-crushing. I needed something that would actually excite me, something I could build a future around. I'd always loved graphic design, but had never pursued it seriously. So I started watching free online tutorials during my lunch breaks. I practiced late at night, creating mock logos and flyers. It wasn't much, but it gave me something to look forward to, a glimmer of hope in an otherwise bleak time. A few months later, I landed my first freelance gig. It was a small project, designing a logo for a local coffee shop. But when I got that $50 payment, it felt like $1,000,000. For the first time in years, I felt proud of myself. Just as I was starting to build momentum, life threw another curveball. My car broke down, again. This time, the mechanic told me the repairs would cost more than the car was worth. Without a reliable vehicle, I couldn't keep my second job. I was devastated. It felt like all the progress I'd made was slipping away. But instead of giving up, I leaned on what I'd learned so far. Focus on what you can control. I cut even more expenses. No takeout, no streaming services, no new clothes, and doubled down on my freelance work. It wasn't easy, but it kept me afloat. Losing my car felt like the universe testing me. One more roadblock in what already felt like an impossible journey. I won't lie. There were nights I sat in the dark, staring at my budgeting spreadsheet, wondering if I'd ever escape the cycle of debt and setbacks. But something had shifted in me since the day I promised myself to keep fighting. I refused to let this be the end of my story. With my grocery delivery job off the table, I leaned harder into graphic design. I started taking on every project I could find. Flyers, business cards, Instagram graphics. No job was too small. My portfolio grew, and with it, my confidence. Slowly but surely, my freelance work became more than just a side hustle. But even as I found a sense of purpose, the strain with my family lingered. My mom was still struggling with my dad's recovery, and my siblings and I were barely on speaking terms. The tension boiled over one afternoon when Kelly called me out of the blue. "Mike," she started, her voice sharp, "we need to talk about Dad's care. You're the one nearby, so you should be stepping up more." "Kelly," I snapped, "do you even know what I'm dealing with? I'm working 2 jobs, I've got debt up to my neck, and I'm trying to keep my head above water. Don't you dare act like I'm not doing enough." We ended the call in anger, both feeling unheard. I hated the distance growing between us, but I didn't know how to fix it. A week later, my mom called me in tears. "Mike," she said, her voice breaking, "your dad fell trying to get out of his wheelchair. He's okay, but I can't do this alone anymore." Hearing the exhaustion in her voice hit me hard. For all my own struggles, I hadn't truly considered how much she was carrying. That night, I sat down and wrote an email to my siblings, laying everything out. "I know we're all overwhelmed," I wrote, "but we need to come together for Mom and Dad. Let's stop fighting and figure this out as a team." To my surprise, Kelly responded almost immediately. "You're right," she admitted. "I've been so focused on what I thought you weren't doing that I didn't see how much you already are. Let's figure this out together." Over the next few weeks, my siblings and I divided responsibilities. I took charge of managing Dad's medical appointments, while Kelly handled financial paperwork remotely. My younger brother, Dave, who lived nearby, stepped in to help with errands and groceries. It wasn't perfect, but for the first time in months, we were working as a family again. The changes didn't happen overnight, but little by little, the cracks in our family started to heal. My dad, stubborn as ever, pushed himself in physical therapy. My mom, relieved to have more support, started to smile again. And my siblings and I. We learned how to lean on each other without letting old resentments take over. One afternoon, while visiting my parents, my mom pulled me aside. "I'm proud of you, Mike," she said, her eyes shining. "I know it hasn't been easy, but you've stepped up in ways I never expected." That simple acknowledgement meant the world to me. By the time I turned 37, my life looked completely different. I'd paid off the last of my $45,000 debt, a milestone that brought me to tears. My freelance business had grown into a full-time career, and I was earning more than I ever had at my old office job. But the most rewarding part? My relationships. My family had become stronger than ever, bonded by the challenges we'd faced together. I even reconnected with Max, my dog, when my ex-wife reached out and asked if I wanted to see him. Spoiler, he's been living with me again ever since. Looking back, I realized that every setback, the broken marriage, the financial struggles, the family turmoil, shaped me into the person I am today. If you're in a dark place right now, I want you to know that you're not alone. The climb out of rock bottom is slow and painful, but every small step matters. Whether it's asking for help, picking up a new skill, or simply making it through the day, you're moving forward, even if it doesn't feel like it. Your story isn't over yet. Keep going.